Hi, good afternoon. We've got Laura Shoaf, who is the Managing Director of Transport for West Midlands, TfWM as an abbreviation. Just want to welcome you to a live event for Downtown in Business. Downtown, it's the Den and it's the Brummie Den. So as an adopted Brummie, Laura, I'd like to welcome you to us and people that are watching. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Hi, good afternoon. Right, just a little bit of history for you. Obviously, that Black Country twang or the Brummie twang didn't quite shine through then. There's a little bit of an American accent. So if you can just how you ended up in beautiful Birmingham, that might be useful for everybody listening.
The same way I think it happens to so many people, which is I fell in love. I fell in love with the man from Tipton, and I've moved here, and I've been here for what must be about 17 years now. But I sound ridiculous when I try to have a fake British accent. People say I sound like Madonna in her affected phase. So I find I've just kept my American accent. It suits me, and yeah. And then people always underestimate you because they think you're American. So it's a good place to start.
Well, the Globe's convinced we've got this Peaky Blinders accent, haven't they? So we're going to have to re-educate everybody. Anyway, so just a brief history of where you've been and some of the roles that you've been in. Majority of them in the Black Country, and now obviously you've got a wider West Midland transport role. But just a little bit of a whistle stop over your history and your.
Sure. So I'm an urban planner by background, and I have a master's degree in urban planning from NYU. And my interest has always been how you make cities especially work. And so when I moved here, I was still working in planning, and I worked in Birmingham for a bit. And then I moved to the Black Country Consortium, and I was their head of strategic planning, working on their spatial plan across the Black Country. And I'm still interested in urban planning. I mean, I'm interested in transport specifically, and that's what I've been focusing on for probably the past decade. But I'm interested in what transport does to make a place a place. So I'm not an anorak. I don't know what different models of trains and buses, and I'm not interested in timetables and train spotting. I'm interested in how transport makes a place work and how it can make a place better and what it does to change people's lives.
Okay, so let's just get the one bit about you studied politics at Colorado as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Is the politics bit, has that little bit of education been useful in your political arena, working for the West Midlands Combined Authority, do you think?
Yeah, it has, because of course I was running transport for West Midlands when there was no mayor. And then, we had an election, and now, we do have a mayor. But I've always worked for local leaders and for the leaders of councils. So I think transport it's a very local issue to people. It's a very important issue to people. So it's always had a political dimension. But there's the difference in politics between the two countries is immense.
It is.
Still learning.
Okay, so what's happened, what's been good since West Midlands Combined Authority has been set up? We've had quite a bit of investment into the region and the whole transport infrastructure and years of planning. So, I mean, we're talking a 30-year plan. So in just a bit of a short sort of prose of that, if you can guide us through that, that would be really useful.
Yeah, well, for certainly from a transport perspective, it's really been about devolution. So if you think about sort of if you're talking about building big capital schemes, take the metro scheme. I'll use the Wednesbury to Brierley Hill metro extension as an example. That's a scheme that predates me. That's a scheme that has been an aspiration for the region to build for well over a decade. But it's just been impossible to deliver. And what happened through devolution was the ability for the West Midlands to come together and to determine what its priorities were and how it wanted to invest its money. And so through devolution and through the devolution agreement, we were able to finally secure the funding that we needed to get that scheme up and running. So for me, it's all about devolution. I can't ever believe for a single second that people sitting in London know more about what the needs of Birmingham and the region are than the people who are sat in Birmingham. Even just train service, I always laugh when I talk to the rail team at the DFT, because I take the train every day. So they like to tell me how the service is. So you couldn't possibly know better than we know here about what it is that we need locally. And in transport, that's really, really true. So that coming together of all 7 metropolitan authorities and our non-constituent members being really clear about what devolution means for the region, what funding it was going to get, and how it wanted to invest it, just has been able to give transport the kind of certainty that we need in order to build these big schemes, because they cost hundreds of millions of pounds and they take years to build. So unless you are certain, if you've got that funding certainty, they don't get started. So for us, we've seen a real renaissance in being able to try to start to promote investment and being able to deliver. So that's the other big thing, is we've had some major successes over the past few years. We opened the exhibition in December on time and on budget, and that's given a lot more confidence to government that we can build metro schemes here in the West Midlands. And then we decided also to take the metro in-house, and that was a decision that we made through the Combined Authority Board, which has been fantastic. So TfWM not only are responsible for building the new extensions, but we also are responsible for the operation of Midland Metro Limited. And being able to borrow against that fare box is also being able to allow us to continue to invest. So some really big, important decisions that have freed us up to allow us to get on and do what we want to do.
Excellent. So we've got a 30-year transport strategy, and I've seen a number of your presentations that talks around that. But can you just help me and our viewers to decide how you prioritise who has what, when? It's limited funds. We build something, we go out, we challenge government, we take on more funds, and then we feed into this. So we're talking billions of pounds, and we're talking massive 30-year infrastructure. How do you know what we're going to need in 5, 10, 15, 20, and even 30 years?
Yeah.
If we look back in Birmingham, we had a whole network of trams all across the city that I just remember as a child, as they were dissipating across the region, how good they were, clean energy, worked well, and actually seemed to always be on time. Now, how are we going to not get back into that situation where we just alleviate all the good that somebody like you and the Combined Authority do for us?
Yeah, it's the same with rail. They're now looking at how to reopen all these rail lines that they shut down in the beaching era. I think there's a real recognition about and a complete sea change in people's view about the environment, and people understanding how important public transport is and the role that it plays in helping make it a cleaner, greener city. And you can't have a region the size of ours without having mass transit. We're not as big as London by any stretch of the imagination, but it is the second city. So what we do is we look at population growth, and we know that the region is growing. And we know that we need to build, a huge number of new homes to accommodate that growth. I mean, the last I looked, I think it's a city the size of Liverpool, 300,000 moving into the region. We know where our health assets are. With something we're acutely aware of at the moment, which is how we are moving people to and from health facilities. We know where education facilities are, and we understand where employment growth is, where housing growth is, and then we try to map where we think that gap is. So for any scheme, we start with demand. So we try to start with, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Is it that there's a connection between, the Winston Green metro stop and City Hospital, and that actually people can't get from one to the other? So if that is, then we try to model what's the size of the problem that we're trying to address. We actually come to mode at the end. So, we don't start by going, where do we want to build the tram? We start by going, what is the capacity that this network needs, and how best do we fill it? And it's important to build in increments so that because cities are like organisms, so they build, they change, but But in general, we try to use the data and the modeling from planning to understand where people are, where they're planning on living, where they need to move to and through, what the numbers will be, and therefore start to think about what the right solution is for them in transport terms.
So we could almost guide where people are going to live. So if we put the transport routes in originally in the middle of nowhere, you know, reaching the city out of conurbation and things like that, we could almost guide where people are going to live, where housing estates are going to be and things like that with transport.
You absolutely, you can. And in fact, there are a lot of planning conditions around the region that say if you want a site to come forward for housing, it needs to be well connected onto the public transport network. Because transport in and of itself doesn't do anything. I mean, if you build a road or if you build a train line between two places that nobody wants to go between, it doesn't do anybody any good. So you have to be serving demand. And we also know that houses see an increase in value. So if you look at the Metro Line 1 that runs between Wolverhampton and Birmingham, we know that house values have a slight increase with it when they're within walking distance from a tram stop.
Okay, so we're looking to invest, correct my figures, about 1.3 billion in the next 10 years, about opening up the metro rail and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's quite a big challenge, but yeah, we've a huge back program of schemes we'd like to see delivered.
So if we, after nationalisation of the rail, all the branch lines disappeared and were closed and things like that, and so we're going to open branch line. Andy Street's got a mindset of opening branch lines, which is excellent. We're going to open all the metro rails across the system, across the West Midlands system and things like that. That's good. Can we affect motorways? Can we do anything for motorways? Can we look at M6 toll? Can you influence that?
I think it's a private concession, so it's run by a private company.
Canadian company, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, the influence we have there is in joint working. So, you know, one of the things that we always agree on is that we want as many people using their road as possible, because for me that gets people off congested motorways, and especially freight. I'd like to work with them to see what we can do to encourage more freight to use that road when it's free and available. But one thing, for example, we have been able to do with them and with Highways England on the motorway network is to be really clear on the signage about, you know, there's something coming up ahead. The M6 toll, you know, this is what it costs, but this will be the journey time if you take it, so that businesses can make a decision on whether or not it's the right choice for them to use that road. Okay,
so looking at technology, so if we're looking at smart technology and join everything up, we're looking at 5G. Can I guide you into giving us some advice and some information around how 5G is going to affect the transport situation around West Midlands?
Yep. So we have a really great forward-thinking innovation team. But when we talk about connected and autonomous vehicles, they have to connect to something else. So that 5G network is going to allow us to help deliver smarter roads, smarter infrastructure, and smarter vehicles, whatever type of vehicles those are. So if you think about this, if you think about sensors, you know, everybody knows when there's certain lights that you can approach, and as soon as you approach, if nobody else is coming, they turn green. You know, they're so great. And there's nothing more frustrating now than approaching a set of traffic signals and you stop and wait and you think, well, why aren't these turning green? There's nobody else coming, you know. And that's all about the intelligence of the sensors on the network. And what 5G does is it just allows those sensors to talk to each other more rapidly, more effectively. And so it will also help guide, for example, if you have, if we get to a point where we have autonomous cars on the road, how those cars are talking not only to each other, but also to the road itself. So that all of that needs 5G in order to work really, really effectively. We'll be able to have smarter roads than we have now. So we'll be able to understand congestion. We'll be able to, you can make better decisions about how you tell people to travel and which way that they need to go. And some of that is all that data that we get through Waze already that is fed in. 5G just enables us to have that work faster, work smarter, work more reliably. I always say one of our challenges is we have a network that's completely in the peak at capacity. You know, the roads are at capacity, the railways at capacity, the buses are full. So the key is, how do we get the most out of what we have while we're waiting to build more? And using technology and innovation to eke that capacity out of, whether it is our roads. You'll see in some places around the world where when they know what train you're waiting for, it will tell you where there's spaces in different carriages. So try carriage D because there's 6 seats available there. So it just allows people to make more informed decisions about everything that they're doing. And then if you think about ambulances, I know this was an example that was well publicized, but an ambulance, when it picks a person up, A, with 5G, the roads can know it's an ambulance coming, but B, it's transmitting that health data back to the hospital before it even arrives there. So again, just an example of how it's making a vehicle much smarter and much more effective.
So communication pretty much is the underlying thing, looking at the big screens around the city, turning the advertising screens into information screens, guiding people through, you know, being able to override and look at different stuff and things like that. The emergency service is particularly interesting to me because I spent 20 years in the fire service, spent 10 years driving fire appliances, trying to get fire appliances through the city. Although the drivers want to help you and want to do the right thing, you know, you're on top of them before they react and things like that. So if there's some way of pre-arming, pre-warning, guiding people to, you know, open a lane, clear a lane, get the emergency services through, would be infinitely sort of beneficial and things like that. So what about new technologies, autonomous vehicles and things like that? So part of my business is working in autonomous vehicles. So I've been working for Lilium, created an autonomous flying taxi with clean energy. You know, that the CAA have given provisional licenses in Germany to use and things like that. This technology's here. It's going to be here. So we'll be seeing literally flying taxis. Have we got that in our 30-year strategy? Have we considered that far ahead with technologies?
I think it's challenging to think that far ahead because in a way you don't know what to plan for. And you know what will take to the skies and what won't. But most people, if they have a modern car, it is at some level already autonomous.
I think you can see that the top of Liverpool Street car park suddenly being for only flying vehicles only. You'll see a sign being created probably in the next 5 to 10 years and things like that. So the new modern up-to-date cars, and some of them are 5G ready, fit particularly well. Autonomous flying vehicles is not beyond the realms of capability and probability. That sort of things will happen. How do we deal with the older vehicles that are around? Let's talk about emission. Let's talk about our clean air zone. How do we tidy up? Because if we look at now with the COVID, and we'll come on to that, the challenges that you've gone through, around the world, suddenly they're talking about India and different countries now seeing the Himalayas. They haven't done that for 30, 40 years. And the whole air zone is becoming sort of cleaner and things like that. Now, being a slight environmentalist, I'm sitting there thinking, this is pretty cool. There's a lot of lessons to be taken out of the COVID disaster. Let's take the positive, you know, the positives out of it and things like that. If we just ban vehicles from the city centre, that would be okay, but we're going to have businesses that are going to starve and things like that. How do we balance that out? So one question at a time. How do we deal with old vehicles, with emissions and poor performing vehicles, with interacting with new 5G technologies and things like that? If you can guide us through your thoughts around things like that, that'd be useful.
Well, it's a real challenge, and certainly I would be always suggesting that if there was another way to get, so Birmingham city centre is a prime example, which is it's very well served between bus, between rail and metro. So I'm always questioning to people, why would you drive to Birmingham anyway? For those people that must, and businesses that need to, there will always be people who need the road network. And what we need to do is get people who are making non-essential journeys off the road. That's essentially what COVID has done, which has taken non-essential journeys and stopped anybody making them. And as a result, there's just less emissions, and as you point out, there are mountain ranges becoming visible for the first time. I think if you talk to small business owners, especially, and you may know better than I do, but what they say is they need a scrappage scheme. People don't want to be driving old vehicles. It's not because they love to pollute that they drive them. It's because that's the van that they have. It's because they can't afford to replace the van, and it's because there's no financial incentive. So there has to be a mechanism by which you can incentivize people to get out of those heavily polluting vehicles.
The government's run scrappage schemes before, and probably we could pick that up from Downtown Business and maybe push that through local MPs, and we could take it up with Andy Street and see where we are for there. That would be useful. But I think, how do we get the transport into companies and keep businesses in Birmingham city centre alive? Why we're going to start putting charges on and things like that. I think the charge has been knocked back for a while. But ultimately, it's the right thing to do. Protect the environment, protect the air, that's right. But how do we keep businesses alive in the city centre? I mean, if we specifically said that transport, the metro was free between 8 or 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, we drive people into work an hour early, potentially, and maybe get them home an hour early. That's an ideal thing. Now, I'm not head of the finance, and I haven't got to pay everybody's wages, infrastructure, or anything like that. But clearly, as a political whim, something like that, free transport into the city, answers all of those argumentative sort of folks that tend to have a bit of a dig. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think there are quite a lot of people that drive into the city because they like to drive into the city, because they don't like to be on public transport. Whether or not it was free might not change their mind. But I do think when you ask people, if you ask most people to come and say, what's one of the best places you've ever been? What's one of the greatest cities that you've ever been to? Most people give you an answer, and they talk about, it was great because you could walk anywhere, there are parks, and there were no cars. And most people don't say the loudest, dirtiest, most congested city. So people, I think, in their hearts know what makes a great place, and limiting non-essential car journeys out of the city center, this is my personal view, will certainly make it a better place. I know I like to walk places where there aren't cars and where it's quiet and where it has that sort of street culture. So we need people also to know that that choosing to drive is not okay. For businesses that rely on deliveries, I saw something the other day. It was I think it might have been Dusseldorf in Germany, but they were setting essentially an outer ring road, and deliveries could get to that point where they could unload, and then they were being delivered by electric trike, like a 3-wheeled bike, so that deliveries could come into the city center, but you didn't have to have big polluting vans. And some of this too is parcel delivery, is people who are at work all day, so they need to order something, they order it online, they have it delivered to work. People just need to be really thoughtful about what that means. That means there's a delivery van that's driving around the city center that doesn't need to be there. So how can we keep those distribution hubs a bit further out, and then maybe use a more sustainable mode of transport to help get those goods to where they need to be? That's one idea. Like I said, I just saw being trialed in Germany, which is interesting.
Okay. Definitely looking at electric vehicles and things like that within the city centre is way ahead. Free transport for people who work in the city centre. On the metro, you couldn't do anything more than that. But let's leave those people.
Yeah, they're already
challenges.
full. Those services are already full. Yeah. But we are really conscious about the fact that keeping transport affordable for the people who rely on it is really, really important. And we don't operate the buses at TfWM, but we do work really closely with our bus operators to make sure that we're setting routes and fares that, like I said, that are just for people who depend upon that network. There are a lot of people who have no private vehicles. There are a lot of people who rely entirely on public transport. It's got to work for them.
And there's a lot of people living in the city centre around that now that are just walking, commuting via things like that. Okay, so let's have a look at other routes of transport and things like that. So bike lanes and things like that, is that in your domain? Are you influencing that?
Yeah, I mean, we again, it's that same bit about trying to identify where are people going from, where are they coming to, where's the right place to put them, and where's the space to put them. Birmingham have done a great job. They've introduced a number of key cycleways throughout the city, but there's a huge amount more to do to promote active travel. But again, it's about getting that balance right, getting them in the right place where they'll be well used. And people want to be kept segregated away from traffic, which, you know, there are all sorts of cycle lanes all over the country to take a look at. But certainly I think what we've been learning is that the most popular ones are those that have that bit of a barrier between people who are cycling and traffic. And then that gives people the confidence to ride with their kids, for people who are just learning to ride. Whereas the sort of white line and sharing the space doesn't necessarily attract the same level of use. So we're constantly trying to learn from other cities about where it's being done well. But I would say that's an area where we're far behind. We don't have anything like the kind of cycling infrastructure we should have. And there's a lot of work to do to put that right.
But we have got plans to that. You're taking it, you know, on board and things like that.
That's right. We've got some funding for it as well.
What's interesting for me is that I sit as vice chair of WASUP, which is World Against Single-Use Plastic. We've taken on an initiative to work with the Commonwealth Games 2022 to use all the canals and waterways. So obviously we're going to use our boast, which is Birmingham's got more waterways than Venice. But that can be opened up to use as routes and things like that. So for the Commonwealth Games, there's 22 miles of canals and waterways that's going to be cleaned up and opened up and tidied up, and in places made safe for public access. So you're going to be able to go from Gas Street Base and all the way down to Alexander Stadium and backwards and forwards between different venues. Is there any mindset to reopen the canals and maybe use those again? Transporting, you know, for transport, maybe bringing goods up canals and things like that. Seemed to have been a good idea in the 19th century and things like that. But with technology, is that an opportunity? And certainly move people by the canal walkways?
Yeah, the Canals and Rivers Trust are a fantastic charity organization who are working. You can see in the city center of Birmingham, where people do sort of essentially commute from the arena. You can get all the way to the mailbox. So the towpaths are phenomenal for walking and cycling, and a huge asset to the region. And when they are tidied and well lit and well used, and people feel safe on them, they're absolutely an incredible asset to have. And so all that investment that CRT organizations like yours are making to make sure that those bits of canal are safe and lit and people can use them is tremendous. There is the link that goes to the university on the canal. That's a pretty good one. One of the challenges we have, maybe more in the Black Country, is just the amount of locks, which definitely slow down commuter traffic from being able to use them. But you know, going back to that conversation about urban planning, you know, I mean, they are part of the network. They're part of our green open space network, but they're also very much part of our active transport network. And what we'd like to see, especially out of the Commonwealth Games, is a real legacy for cycling for the region, and a bigger and wider take-up of cycling in the West Midlands than we have.
So how many people are we expecting to come into the West Midlands during the Commonwealth Games?
You know, I'm not quite sure I know the answer to that because they haven't put the tickets on sale yet. But I'm sure the worldwide audience, at least on the television, is in the millions. It'll be a great showcase for the West Midlands.
There was 7 billion people listened to the opening ceremony and things like that, which was quite impressive. And there's going to be billions of people kind of listening to the events. I think we're looking at 1 million or so people coming into the region and things like that. When will we start thinking about where these people are going to go, how we're going to move them around and things like that? So how does your organisation ramp up to cope with events like that?
Yeah, so we have started. So we have a Commonwealth Games draft strategic transport plan that's up on the website. So we know roughly where the venues are. and we know roughly the scheduling of events. So, for example, if you know where the pool is, there's between the swimming and diving, there's morning events and there's afternoon events. We know where the opening ceremony will take place. We know where the athletes village is going to be. So the modeling work has begun. Spectator numbers are a little bit more difficult because obviously until we sell the tickets and know where the people are coming from, hard to know how we'll move them around. But there's a lot of investment going on. So if you think about the A34 in the area around Perry Bar, where there will be a huge amount of Commonwealth Games related activity. There are plans to rebuild the train station, which will be fantastic. It needs investment, I think is safe to say. We're looking at what's called a sprint bus, which is essentially, it's a hybrid between a regular bus and a tram with dedicated running and journey time reliability running down the A34. If you go over to the university, where they'll be hosting a number of events as well, University Station should be rebuilt in time for the games. University Station is actually a busier train station than Crewe, which most people don't realize. It's only got 2 platforms. But with the university and all the health assets there, it's an incredibly busy station that's not fit for purpose. So again, redesigning that station there. And then obviously we'll have some temporary bus lanes in terms of moving athletes, in terms of moving spectators, and then there's something called Games Family, which are all the other people, the media, who need to move between venues and where they're staying. So it's hugely complicated. Like I said, we've done the first draft of the plan. We've taken that out for consultation, and then we work really closely with the organizing committee who've hosted games in other cities. To make sure we're learning the lessons of other cities. But I think given where we are, it really should be a clean, green public transport games.
Excellent. I mean, with people like Ian Reid leading as CEO for the Commonwealth Games, and people like that, John Crabtree as chair, globally sort of experienced people and things like that, I think we're in good hands. Now, let's deal with COVID, because you've done a sterling job moving key workers around the city and things like that. But if you can talk us through your strategy, where you are at the moment, where you think it's going to take us and things like that, that would be quite useful.
Yeah, it's been really challenging, obviously, needless to say, because the first bit of work we had to do was to figure out what a temporary network was going to look like. So, we have the rail companies were taken back into DFT, and they're looking at their timetables and what routes they're going to run. Obviously, we're quite tied into the bus companies, understanding what they're running, and then we run the metro. But trying to reduce the service, because obviously there's a reduction in staff who are able to work, but we needed enough space to keep people socially distant, so you couldn't have a crammed bus. You need enough buses to make sure that if you need to take the bus, you can sit far enough away from other people to be safe. So trying to understand what that network would look like in a reduced service, how we would keep people safe, was the first challenge. Now, the network is really stabilized, which is good. We're making sure that we're serving all of the key hospitals, but we really want that network to be for the people who must rely on it, for people who have to be traveling, and in not encouraging people to use it. So again, a bit of a strange position to find ourselves in, to say, we've done a great job getting the network, but please don't travel. Please don't travel. Please don't travel. So that's the message, we're trying to reiterate, which is absolutely do not take public transport unless you have to. Save it for those people who absolutely rely on it.
The feedback so far is that you've done an excellent job, you and the team and things like that. So on behalf of the West Midlands people, thank you for that and congratulations on that point.
It's been actually a real privilege to be able to do it. So we've had some great partners. So, we pay for a ring and ride service. We've repurposed those vehicles, so they're taking key workers from transport hubs into hospitals. We were able to make free 9:30 travel available to older people especially older people who don't have cars, because we were finding that they were doing their shopping hour might be between 8 and 9 at the local supermarket, but they didn't have a car. So because their pass was stopping them traveling before 9:30, they weren't actually able to take advantage of that. So we were able to make that free, and then working with partners, and we chose ourselves to say that any NHS worker and children of key workers could travel on the network for free. So we've, again, but trying at the same time to limit the people who are traveling and make sure they can do it in a safe way.
So having control of the transport system has been particularly useful for you, because you can make decisions overnight and implement them pretty much the next day and things like that, which is excellent. So
and it brings us full circle to devolution, which is I'd love to see more services devolve to us in the region to allow us to run them. In my
which was going to be my next question. So the rail network has been particularly challenging, and Andy Street has found some frustration over the last sort of 12 months or so and things like that. What's in the future for the railway system and things like that? Is it coming under your control? When does it come under your control? And what's that going to look like in the very short future?
So sadly not under my control anytime soon, I don't think. We are all awaiting a national white paper, something called the Williams Review, which will be highlighting and out for consultation on some of the next steps on what rail devolution might look like. I think there's a pretty wide industry recognition that the system that we have now doesn't work as well as it needs to. And then the big question that Keith Williams was asked to try to figure out is, well, so what happens next? What could devolution look like? What would it look like in regions? And I mean, part of the problem is, as I'm sure you can appreciate, is West Midlands Trains operates pretty much our local network, but it has to interface with Avanti, which was Virgin and cross country. So they're national services running through local networks. And so how you find the right level of devolution and control on who makes those decisions about what can and can't and shouldn't happen in the region is one that's probably still up for some debate. So I'm hoping in the not so distant future we'll have a white paper from which we can start to think about what that will mean for us in the West Midlands.
If we take control of the railways and things like that, it just seems to give us the complete package, doesn't it? It pulls everything under our jurisdiction, our control. Really, it's got to happen, hasn't it? So, let's keep lobbying, let's keep supporting you and giving you much influence as possible. So if you want to contact any of the businesses within the West Midlands and things like that, Downtown in Business is obviously a great platform to do that. And I think we're talking about setting up probably, some events around you, meeting some key business leaders from Wolverhampton all the way down to Coventry and things like that. So we'll invite you to do that. Yeah. I think for the last few minutes, and I'm just looking at the time, bearing in mind that you've got other calls and things like that, we've taken up some of your time. Just reaching back to 2017 when you won a Cobber Award.
I did.
The award was a contribution to transport and infrastructure. Cobber 2017. What have you done with your trophy? Where is it at the moment? And I haven't seen it on your CV. Is it going to go on your CV at some point?
It should. I haven't. I can't think the last time I updated my CV, but I probably ought to. It tells you how much I like my job, I suppose. If my CV isn't up to date, it sits proudly in my office. Alongside some of the team awards that we've had, although that's the only individual award I have ever won. And incredibly, I can't remember, I think my son was ill. I couldn't make it to the awards ceremony, so I think Louise Friebel picked it up for me.
Your CEO for the Combined Authority deputised.
Yeah, she did. It was in my office when I got back the next day.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, just want to thank you for your time today, for your insights into what your history, what's happening now, what's going to happen in the future, dealing with COVID and things like that, for the good reporter for that. You've got an incredibly difficult task. You seem to be doing a great job and things like that. And I just want to thank you on behalf of Downtown in Business and the residents of West Midlands Combined Authority, Laura, for your continued efforts and for your time today. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll speak in a very near future.
Yeah, hopefully face to face.
Yeah, definitely. Take care, be safe, and keep away from this virus. Thank you very much.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.